Hi everyone, thank you for watching it. I will discuss the requirements for a software audit model in safety critical domains. Professor Dr. Luiz Eduardo is advising me and Professor Dr. Johnny is co-advising me. First, I will provide a brief introduction followed by a background and related work. Then, an overview of the proposed software audit model, a discussion of the findings until this moment, finally a conclusion and the next steps of this research. The technological advances and the constant concern to ensure the safety of people oblige us to increasingly use software to implement complex and critical functions for different safety critical systems. Not only for the aeronautic area, but also for medical, railway, and others. The aeronautic area identified the necessity of establishing certification authority requirements to allow the development of safety-critical software. Due to it, standards were created to provide guidelines for the development and define objectives to be accomplished. One example of a standard for this area is the RTCA DO178C and its related supplements used as a means of approval. The certification authorities also created the Order 8110.49 Change 1, which has a chapter to discuss the software assessment and what is expected when conducting the audit. When associating the Order 8110.49 Change 1 with the RTCA DO178C, it is possible to establish a way to assess a safety-critical software by dividing it into 4 stages: planning, development, verification, and final. Some of the benefits that I intend to achieve with the proposed audit model is define the scope of an audit independently of the chosen software development model and the percentage of the artifacts generated with this. It will be possible to reduce the cost with reviews once it is feasible to define the scope based on what is available, avoiding reworks and re-executions of the audit. Anticipate the issues by identifying it early and have a process that can be tailored to different audit types, different standards, and software development areas. One of the definitions of requirements is that it is a software capability that provides value to or is needed by a stakeholder. That is, the requirement defines what the software product must do. Additionally, the definition of software requirement specification is a document created when a detailed description of all aspects of the software must be built shall be specified before the project is to commence. Based on these definitions, before writing the defined software audit model process and the related questions database, I have identified the requirements for a good process and the required information to develop it as expected. This short paper's main objective is to demonstrate how the requirements elicitation was used as part of the creation of the software audit model. First, I have listed the requirements to achieve this objective. Keep in mind what was necessary for a software audit model. Once the requirements are identified, I present them and discuss their relevance. Based on them, I have created an initial set of questions to verify the compliance with a standard. For this short paper, the questions were based on RTCA DO178C. And finally, With the requirements and a set of questions, it was possible to write the process to apply a software audit model that can be used to assess any safety-critical software with a scope defined by the author to attend its necessity. Some of the important definitions are: audit. It is an activity that is an independent examination of the software lifecycle processes and their outputs to confirm the required attributes. Certification process. A process that establishes communication, understanding, and agreements between the applicant and the certification authority. It is essential to notice that in the aeronautic area, safety-critical software is not certified. Instead of it, the software is approved to be used. Embedded software development, it is typically split into 5 processes: requirements, design, implementation, verification, and validation, and is one of the types of safety-critical software. Software audit model. It is a methodology that allows audit of any software development based on the software scope, allowing the use of customized checklists. It also has a defined process with the necessary activities and the related steps to conduct an audit. Since the beginning of my research, I have found some papers in the literature that have discussions about safety-critical software. Some of them proposed a method, like a statistical method, that supports the software certification audits. Others used concepts of assurance cases and associated it with the goal structural notation framework. In another paper, this same framework was associated with goal question metrics. Besides, there is a paper that discusses the use of the job aid set of worksheets by regulation authorities and their representatives. However, the FAA has discontinued the job aid and is no longer available to be consulted. Creating the software audit method started in the requirements definition to identify all the functions necessary to establish a flexible process that would help the auditor evaluate any safety-critical software development. Once the requirements are defined, it is used to generate the software audit model, with the necessary activities that must be executed to conduct an audit. As a suggestion of an initial set of questions for the requirements database, the choosing standard is the RTCA DO178C. Next, it is necessary to validate the proposed process by conducting an audit and storing its results. Based on the results stored, an analysis must be carried to verify if the safety-critical software achieved compliance with the applicable standards. Before defining the proposed software audit model, and based on the definition that a requirement is used to determine the functionality that must be built into the software, my goal was to identify the main requirements of an audit process, to develop a process that can be tailored according to auditor necessities and software project scope. The requirements were elicited based on the author's several years of experience in conducting assessments in software development, using different standards, and also based on the systematic literature review conducted. A total of 26 requirements were identified for the proposed software audit model. Here I present a sample of them. Requirement 1.1 is related to the software audit model as a whole, and I have classified as high based on its relevance. Requirement 1.3 is related to software requirements process and one of the goals that are expected to be evaluated in this phase. Requirement 1.6 is related to the software design process and requests an assessment related to flow down the requirements into the architecture, including the modules and the allocation of functions. Requirement 1.18 is related to the necessity of evaluating if the implementation review ensured that the source code is correctly produced based on the software requirement and design. Requirement 1.23 is related to the necessity of having a question database where the questions used to customize a checklist are stored. Requirement 1.26 defines that during the audit execution, all questions selected must require their related evidence. Considering that all the requirements were identified, the software audit model was developed with the following characteristics. It is focused on safety-critical software assessment. The initial proposed questions intends to verify the compliance with applicable standards, in this case, the RTCA DO 178C. It is possible to customize a checklist to carry out and conduct an audit. The audit can be defined based on the project scope and can group different phases or activities. It is possible to store the responses and their related evidence to perform an analysis later. It allows verifying the compliance with the process established as well with the applicable standards. And finally, ensure that the software is mature enough to be used. A systematic literature review was conducted to understand what is discussed in the literature and the methods used to conduct an audit. As a result, it was possible to conclude that most of the papers are not explicit, indicating if established a methodology or if used an existing one. Based on it, my research intends to create a software audit model that allows the auditor plan the audit scope independently of achieving a specific milestone, allowing the auditor to evaluate the development based on plans, schedules, and project necessity to define the scope, and thus increase the possibility of identifying issues in advance by reducing any rework in more advanced stages of development. As presented previously, Requirement 1.1 is related to the software audit model as a whole and defines the foremost functionality allowing to evaluate any software process. Requirement 1.2 up to 1.21 is related to phases definition with what must be assessed in each of them considering their main concerns. Requirement 1.22 up to 1.26 are related to software audit model usability, especially the customizable checklist. For example, what is necessary to create the questions database. The initial version of the proposed question database contained 91 questions distributed among all software development activities. For example, to assess a requirements phase, it is important to evaluate if the software process was followed during the requirements creation, and if the requirements comply with applicable standards. However, it is also important to evaluate if all software characteristics were captured in the requirements set, if there is the necessary information to flow down the requirements for the next phase, if the requirements capture the several aspects of a safety-critical software. Finally, some of the things that I was able to conclude with this part of my research are that Eliciting requirements are useful not only for software development, but also for another area, like a process definition. By using this approach, it was possible to take all the benefits of defining the main requirements of my software audit model before writing its entire process, which will allow me to propose a robust process that is accurate to be used. It also gave me the ability to understand what is necessary to propose a new software audit model, which are the most relevant aspects for it, and implement improvements in my initial proposal. With the set of questions created to evaluate software developments that use the RTCA DO178C as a means of approval, I will validate these questions with a group of software specialists with several years of experience in this standard. Once the proposed questions are mature enough based on their evaluation, I intend to conduct an audit in a safety-critical software developed using the V-cycle process. With the results of this audit, I will analyze it by comparing it with a waterfall and incremental developments to validate that my proposed model can be used in different software life cycles. All these steps will be carried out as part of my research for the master's degree at the Federal University of São Paulo. The requirements solicitation was an essential aspect of this research because it allowed me to better understand the innovative elements of my research for the master's degree. It also helped me to have a clear view of the entire process that I should create and how to validate it. These are the references that I used in this presentation. If you have any questions about this short paper or my research for the master's degree, this is my email. Thank you.